Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan. Unappeasable, unshakable, and unstoppable. These are the perfect words to describe this infamous GodSlayer. Now, to be honest, not much is known about the origin of Bairn, but what is definitely known is the fact that he happens to be a warrior prince, one from the kingdom of Endra. The character of Bairn made his debut appearance in the first issue of the comic book series published by Image Comics, entitled Spawn: GodSlayer. Addressing those of you who are not aware of the comic book series, Brian Holguin's Spawn: GodSlayer is basically the reimagining of the celebrated Spawn series. The events of this comic book series take place in a medieval fantasy world, one that's ruled by legions of gods. Enter the mysterious warrior prince, Bairn, who is fated to go up against the old gods and kill them one after another. Well, of course, there's more to his story, which brings us to the main content of today's video, one where we will be exploring the first 4 issues of the 2006 comic book series. Are you ready? Let's begin then. But hold up, before we go into our explanation, we have just a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now we can begin. Spawn: GodSlayer, Issue 1. Deal has been made. The readers are taken to the ancient lands of Arcadia, and it is almost twilight there. As the day is seen coming to an end, a light glaring from the sun is seen speeding across the landscape. A closer peek into the approaching light, and it looks more like a living flame, one that bounds ungently over the pastoral realm, the furrowed field, the lush green grassland, the lake, the stream, and even the village, while scaling all defensive walls of Mount Carabax and the floating citadel of Pandos. It is Tybalt, the herald of the gods, who comes bearing pressing news. The messenger, upon reaching the gallery, only finds 6 of the 13 Arcadian gods: Xanthea, King Abax, Eltris, Mathone, Aelf, and Castria, but nonetheless reports to them about a nameless marauder, one that's bound by no flag, having killed Lyra of the 400 Graces. There is no denying that the news of the death of the powerful goddess does come as a shock, and it dawns upon the other gods that whoever is accountable for the death of Lyra is more than capable of seeking them one day, with the sole intention of causing them harm as well, and therefore they need to be prepared to face this threat. The scene then shifts to Neva, narrating how she was murdered along with the goddess that she served so faithfully by the person whom she loved the most in the world. We learn that Neva had become a vessel for the goddess Lyra, post-learning that her beloved Bairn was no more. The readers find her calling out his name and even crying for his attention, but Bairn neither looks at her nor does he speak. In fact, her cries literally fall on deaf ears, and Bairn is seen standing still. He does not move. He doesn't even make the slightest of gestures towards Neva. With the duo approaching Bairn's strange-looking strangehold, Neva is left with no other option but to follow Bairn inside. Speaking of the place, not only does it look like it breathes evil, but it also kind of throbs like this gigantic black heart. As for Bairn, he is seen moving like a sleepwalker, entranced and bewitched, while simultaneously carrying the burning spear of Lyra with him. Inside, Neva is startled to discover a bizarre collection of ancient relics, such as a pearled crown, a ghostly mirror, and a 7-fingered gauntlet. Neva keeps asking Bairn what kind of place this is, but the latter seems to be lost in his own world. The readers are taken to the next world in the very kingdom of Umber, while eyes finally fall on Earl of Harvost. One look at him, and you can clearly make out that the year has been particularly difficult for him. We learn about his personal losses. His eldest child, his very daughter called Spring, had died of fever, and it was the same sickness that took the life of his wife soon after. Furthermore, his wife had also left him with twin sons, On and Eagle. While On was healthy and had twinted cheeks, Eagle was feeble and pale. Coming back to the storyline, Earl is seen looking at one of his sons and telling him not to be afraid, as it will be over very soon. Something doesn't feel right about this, and what follows is certainly not for the faint of heart. Earl is then seen sacrificing Eagle by throwing him into the very fire that he had lit up in the first place. Of course, there is a bit of backstory here as well. We learn that it is almost time for the Winter King to stalk the countryside, and that on the night of the long shadows, the very souls of children are literally plucked like roses from a garden as some kind of sacrifice to the ravenous god of Umber. Coming back to Earl, he firmly believes that Eagle's too weak to have survived the season, even if the Winter King was kind enough to spare him. And after everything he's gone through that year, he was not ready to lose both his sons. Therefore, he did what he thought was necessary on his part. The ashen-faced Earl is then seen coming back to his village after an hour or so, with On safely and warmly tucked underneath his coat. His neighbors, on the other hand, are seen busy assembling wood and painting good luck charms on their doors, with one of them stating to Earl that may the king be merciful towards them. Earl thanks his fellow neighbor, but deep inside, everyone nursed the same venomous thought, better he than I. Earl eventually reaches home. From inside, he looks out a window and watches the snow fall while waiting for the shadows to come.
Bairn, on the other hand, comes back to his usual self, but for a brief period with my dad. He is seen lamenting the loss of his love, Neva, and addresses himself as foul, cursed, and wretched. The fact that he's responsible for her death is unbearable on his part, and he realizes that he's gone way too far this time. There's nothing more that he wishes than to be released to his death. Neva, who is disclosed to be a spirit, attempts to console Bairn, but the latter is obviously inconsolable. So much so that he attempts to remove his painful memories by resorting to nepenthe, or, in other words, a drug that helps one dull the mind and drown the senses. Neva becomes exceedingly infuriated when she finds Bairn asking for the chalice and the pearl. She further knocks the chalice of nepenthe wine out of his hands and demands that he looks at her, while stating to him that all this while she has followed him to his dark and pestilent tomb in the hopes of having Bairn acknowledge her presence. While her actions make her become visible to Bairn, she also manages to break the ghostly mirror when the chalice lands upon it. This results in scores of headless, shambling, misshapen creatures swarming forth and descending on Bairn, one man against a deathly army. That's where this equation stands, but thanks to the light of Lyra and Neva, which eventually help Bairn get rid of the entire lot. After the battle, Bairn tells Neva that she cannot stay there. He describes the place as his own hell, and that he is nothing but a slave there. He further tells her that death would have been way better than this cruel half-life that he chose, and that he was left with no choice while he was sinking to the bottom of the sea and almost dying to make a bargain. "Save me. Let me return to my love. I will promise you anything." It was then that the Dark Master answered him, not by speaking, not through any words, but by thoughts, images, and the strangest of alien dreams. Bairn understood the offer and knowingly agreed. He was more than ready to do his Dark Master's bidding, just so that the latter would let him return to Neva once again. Bairn soon became unstoppable and unyielding, especially in his pursuit of the old gods, and he was filled with nothing but battle lust. Post-hunting and killing the godlings, he would come back to his stronghold and drown his thoughts with the nepenthe wine. And then took place the cruelest turn of events. Bairn was returned to Neva, at last, only to kill her and carry on with his quest. To be honest, it isn't a quest to Bairn anymore. It's more like an endless walking nightmare. After he tells Neva that he doesn't even remember how long he's been doing the Dark Master's bidding, Neva tells him that it's been almost 40 years. With Neva telling Bairn that she is here for him, he tells her that he still thinks that she's a figment of his imagination. Bairn and Neva have barely touched each other's hands when the former gets summoned by the Dark Master. With Bairn disappearing into the shadows, Neva tries looking for him in every nook and hollow on the vile, wicked place, but she cannot find him anywhere. As for Bairn, he is seen experiencing unspeakable pain. His mind is battered, broken, and remade over and over again. His thoughts are drowned with horrific, cruel images, dark thoughts, and information. The orders have been given, and Bairn is quickly seen stumbling from a secret chamber. There's fire in his blood. He is all the more eager for battle, and the GodSlayer now knows who his next target is: Urshrek, the Winter King. Issue 2, Under the Yoke of Tyranny. Back at the fortress of the GodSlayer, Neva finds herself alone once again. She remembers Bairn telling her that he must leave, and that the Dark Master has spoken. But she also remembers Bairn swearing to her that he would take her with him and lead him out of this horrid place. As Neva feels Bairn's hand dissolve into nothingness beneath her grip, she realizes that he is gone and lets out a loud scream, calling his name. Speaking of Bairn, he is seen venturing across the sleeping hills into the Carrion Pass. When he calls out Neva's name aloud, all of a sudden he is greeted by an unfamiliar voice that signals Bairn to come over to his location. The GodSlayer is taken aback by the presence of another man, who is seen tied up and hanging upside down. With the man asking Bairn to help him out, the latter asks him if he's responsible for his current situation. The man gives him a proposal. He asks Bairn to either leave him there or free him and give him the chance to tell him his side of the story. Bairn tells him that he's not interested in involving himself in the matters of others, and that the man should plead his case to the looming vultures and the crows. It is then that the man states that it's not the birds that he's scared of, it's the fierce and feral carrion wolf. The readers get a frightening look at this colossal creature who is about to pounce on Bairn. The following sequence takes the readers back to the Kingdom of Umber. Earl is seen on top of a mule, recalling how it was just yesterday when the entire village was assembled at the Great Hall to honor the dead children whose souls were deprived of them on the very night of Long Shadows. Earl makes his way into the Great Hall, while the children are placed on top of long oaks and draped in linen. While prayers are being whispered to comfort the living, in reality, they are chiefly gestures, which express gratitude that more were not taken. Earl is seen breaking the solemn silence and stating that despite him offering Eagle as a secret sacrifice in order to let On have a longer life, the Winter King showed him no mercy when he took the soul of On. Earl further addressed Urshrek as cruel, while stating that the Winter King has only offered them hardship and misery. He calls himself and the rest of the villagers sad, pathetic fools, and tells them that they are committing serious acts of murder. When the grief-stricken Earl is seen banging his hands on the oak tables, which results in the sprinkling sage and Meadow Street getting tossed off the table, as well as the corpses of the children moved, his actions are categorized as blasphemous. The rest of the villagers attempt to stop him, while stating to him that his actions won't let anyone, for that matter, get spared from Urshrek's wrath.
Earl, upon realizing that he has nothing more to lose, calls out to Urshrek and tells him that he might be a king for the rest of them, but he is nothing but a monster. He further calls the Winter King his enemy and states that he will only be praying for his death henceforth. Coming back to Bairn, he is seen engaging himself in an intense battle with the carrion wolf. The creature, mind you, is as tall as a tree and is capable of turning to smoke. It is only after a bit of struggle, trickery, and aid from the other undisclosed man that Bairn is finally able to get rid of the savage beast. The stranger finally discloses himself as Dromo and starts following Bairn. As Dromo floods him with questions, Bairn asks him that he is looking for the Kingdom of Umber. With Dromo telling him that it's a few days' travel by foot, Bairn tells him to show him the shortest route. It doesn't take Dromo much time to figure out that Bairn is off to kill someone, and with the latter asking him about the Winter King, Dromo goes into the very history of Umber. We learn that the kingdom is ruled by two gods, twin brothers to be more specific. While the first one happens to be the kind, mild, sovereign Summer King, who is said to rule the lesser part of the year, the other happens to be the tyrant Urshrek, who is reported to reign over the greater part of the year. Much like the readers, Bairn gets intrigued by the word tyrant, and ends up asking Dromo what he meant when he called Urshrek that. It is then that Dromo points out the very differences between the two gods. Unlike the Summer King, who is happy with sacrifices of grain and fruits that are left on the altar, the Winter King, on the other hand, happens to be a cannibal who enjoys human sacrifices, particularly babies stolen in the night. The following scene has the readers back to Earl, only this time he is found inside some kind of a prison cell. We learn about his grandmother, who happened to be a witch, and that Earl had apparently learned some of her craft while he was young. Earl is then seen making some kind of a wish weaving, and hopes that something, somewhere, will not only hear his pleas, but also answer them, thereby making the very end of the Winter King. A handbound Earl is then seen being placed on top of a blind mule, who has been scrubbed with coarse salt and lashed with thorns. His neighbors are seen cursing, spitting, and hurling stones at him. In short, he is banished from there and sent into the wild. Also, his name will never be spoken, except maybe at times late at night, so as to scare unruly children into behaving properly. Earl's skin starts getting affected thanks to the extreme nature of the winds, and his eyes start growing weary while looking at the endless pale horizon. However, he doesn't shed a single drop of tears. Earl is done with begging. He is ready to meet his own doom like a man, greet it fearlessly, and also spit in its eye. Coming back to Dromo, he is seen surprising Bairn with an assortment of things that are called gifts. Among these gifts are horses, food, wine, weapons, as well as boots, all stolen from the Grand Tavern, Magda's. Dromo warns him that the place they are going to is both foul and freezing, and therefore it would be foolish on their part to go unprepared. The GodSlayer and his guide are then seen riding together, traveling many miles past the Titan's Hills, through the dark heart of the Trader's Wood, and along the Deadfall Pass, until they reach their destination. Neva, on the other hand, is seen looking for answers in relation to the enslavement of her beloved when she is visited by a prideful goddess, one that is looking to avenge the murder of her twin. The goddess is seen offering Neva a bargain, but whether the latter accepts it or not is not revealed until the third issue. This brings us to the very end of the second issue, that has the duo of Bairn and Dromo encounter the Orange Beard, who warns them about the wrath and might of the Winter King. With the being eventually asking Bairn to end him, Bairn does so, and tells Dromo that the time has come for them to go their separate ways. But with Dromo wanting to accompany him further and witness what happens next, Bairn lets him in on his quest.
Issue 3, The Stuff of Nightmares.
With Bairn and Dromo eventually reaching the kingdom of Umar, the duo get ambushed by Urshrek's horde of shadow warriors. At first, they are not able to make out what the creatures are. After all, when you have swords passing through them like air, it's bound to alarm you. Upon realizing that they are shadows, Bairn asks Dromo to close his eyes before he is seen wielding his sword. Of course, they give the GodSlayer an advantage over his enemies, and Dromo is left with no choice but to ask Bairn about his mad quest that has almost every force of darkness conspiring against him. Bairn doesn't give him an answer. Instead, he tells him to stay behind, and that he will be able to find his own way from there. But Dromo prefers to stay by the side of his companion. As they reach the King's Road, they are stopped by the guards at the gate, who ask them if they have a warrant for passing. Dromo strikes up a conversation with the guard, stating to him that he and his friend have business in the city, and they are terribly late for a meeting with an entire guild of merchants. The guard stops him right there, and tells him that they aren't really fond of strangers, and that they should come back in the morning. Bairn, having had enough of chitter-chatter, tells the guard to stand aside, and with the latter trying to touch his sword, his hand gets severely cut. As they step aside, Bairn thanks Dromo for all his help, and tells him that his journey ahead is only his. With Dromo asking him if he should wait for him there, Bairn asks him to leave the mountain, as well as the country if he can. Dromo wishes him luck, and tells him to look for him in the finest pub on the high street, and that he will be buying him a drink after he is done with his business. Dromo is next seen making his way to Greater Weeping in search of the finest pub, and when he finds one, he goes inside for a drink. As for Bairn, he finally makes it to Mount Nilfrost, one that is known as the home of the Winter King. He calls out King Urshrek's name and tells him that he has come for him. Bairn's intentions are pretty clear and swift, we might add. He is seen wasting no time attacking Urshrek with his mega sword. Urshrek initially addresses him as a toy soldier, one that has come to play with him, but after the very first strike he realizes Bairn reeks of death and that he has no soul for him to relish on. Irked, he decides to swallow Bairn, but is kind of surprised to find Bairn to be as quiet as possible in terms of words. Bairn finally states that he offers nothing except for doom, and pierces his sword inside King Urshrek. The next scene takes the reader back to Dromo, who is seen enjoying a drink at the pub. With him asking the barkeep for another bottle, he is met by the same guard that he had crossed paths with upon reaching the King's Road. The guard is seen bringing more forces along with him, and it goes without saying that a fight ensues between Dromo and the guard. The readers are again taken back to Bairn, who had already plunged his sword deep inside Urshrek, but alas, what the GodSlayer thought would slay the Lord of Frost and Withering only enrages him to an extent where Urshrek is seen recharging himself by draining the very life out of unfortunate humans. This is depicted when the men inside the pub start dropping dead one after another. Soon, the streets of Greater Reaping are racked with chaos, and it dawns upon the residents that Urshrek is feeding. It is a terrible sight. Screams are heard from the open windows, bodies are seen withering and shrinking, and the bones eventually get crumbled into dust. That's not all. Faces are seen getting twisted in pain. Throats start rattling, and souls start getting reaped by the ravenous god. It is the same all over Umber. As Urshrek continues to ravenously feed on the souls, it gives him strength and momentarily satisfies a hunger that knows no end. Urshrek becomes humongous and even more terrifying than before, and all hopes of overthrowing this cannibalistic fiend start to decrease. The issue ends with the plague ship emerging itself from the pale mist. We also get a good glance of the new captain, Neva, in this case standing at the very prow and having her eyes fixed on a distant horizon. Issue 4, Business Left Unfinished. While it is true that just a few moments ago, the Winter King was almost on the receiving end of the battle, one look at him now, and readers will find him standing in triumph, having nourished himself with the very souls of those that he had ruled over. As he looks at Bairn from above, he says, "Little dead soldier, you are doomed!" Urshrek then lets out a deep and sonorous roar, which has jagged sheets of glacier-like blades shooting out from the frozen ground. As the GodSlayer looks up at the towering mammoth god, he cannot help but feel awe for a moment, and then he remembers that he has been sent there with a purpose, and he will not yield no matter what the odds. Let's not forget the fact that he has been dispatched on a mission which only means one thing: he will fight till the bitter end. He will stalk his prey until one of them emerges victorious and the other one is dead. With the GodSlayer analyzing Urshrek, it suddenly dawns on him that the latter is a little more than a wild beast who eats when he's hungry and fights when he feels threatened. That said, Bairn is seen engaging in a fierce battle against the Winter King, only to be cast down down by a powerful blow from Urshek. As the enduring warrior lies on the ground, limp and broken, he finds himself engulfed in the shadows from underneath the Winter King's cloak. The GodSlayer struggles to resist him, nonetheless gets devoured by the darkness, and seemingly disappears from there. Dromo, in the meantime, is seen walking down the streets of Greater Weeping, amidst the twisted, hollow bodies of the recently deceased. The sight is enough to sober even the drunkest of souls. Speaking of the wrathful Urshek, he is then seen returning back to his tower in Mount Nilfrost. It is only fair to say that now that his appetite has been satisfied and his anger quelled, it does call for a nap time. As for Bairn, he is eventually discovered to be sealed inside the dark amulet, adorned by Urshek around his neck. Now, if one was to look at the things from Bairn's perspective, the place where he's sealed looks more like a paradise. The air is sweet and wildflowers and sun is seen dancing gently on his face, and there's not an ounce of pain in his body. The warlust also seems to have left his blood. The water there is clearer than crystal and sparkling like the stars. Bairn is seen quenching his thirst from a nearby stream when he gets greeted by a humanoid creature who introduces himself as Joran and greets him to the idyllic land that he addresses as home. With Joran stating to Bairn that he has finally found some peace, the latter is a bit hesitant to accept it. Anyone in his place, after all the prior afflictions that he had faced, is bound to think otherwise. Initially, peace happens to be an unfamiliar emotion to Bairn. He is seen mistrusting it, suspecting it, and even going to the extent of thinking that it must be some kind of a trap. Next, he is able to sense some kind of truth in Joran's words, and finds comfort in the idea, but with days passing by, he is plagued by troubling dreams, memories filled with dark visions, and the cruelest of bargains. The readers are then taken back to Dromo, who is seen braving the harsh weather and makes his way towards Mount Nilfrost. Dromo is also seen recovering the sword of Bairn from a nearby tree, quite unconvinced that his friend will have need of it. As he walks into the lion's den, he finds the wicked cannibal god sleeping away to glory, but he cannot find any trace of the GodSlayer. As he wonders where Bairn is, the latter is seen going through another nasty nightmare, one that includes his beloved Niva. The troubling dream wakes up Bairn as he leans over the lake to drink from its cool depths. Something catches his eye. Upon seeing his own reflection, he gets reminded of a tree that his eyes had gazed upon when he first entered the place. While one of the branches of the tree was bare, the other was filled with flowers, but they both shared the same trunk. Bairn finally sees the truth, one god with two faces. As he walks up to an unsuspecting Joran, he drives a weapon that he molds right through Joran, without the slightest bit of hesitation and mercy. The readers can now see the amulet, identical to the one around the neck of the Winter King. Coming back to the Nilfrost, Urshrek's amulet is seen to shatter, which makes the twin god let out with an anguished roar. The Winter god is now vulnerable, yet he sets his eyes on the one responsible for it. As he bears down on the GodSlayer with all his godly wrath, Dromo appears and throws at Bairn his sword. The GodSlayer grabs his weapon right on time and drives the sword through Urshrek's body. It is almost like witnessing energy that can be compared to 1,000 thunderstorms as the cannibalistic god breathes his last. But with Urshrek's death, his realm begins to crumble, and the duo attempt to flee from there and land themselves on an iceberg, one that seems to be drifting down some kind of a river into the mist. What looks like an iceberg emerges as something familiar. We are stressing on the plague ship coming into view. Bairn is beyond surprised to find Niva in it. She not only seems to have been revived, but is also seen donning a similar armor like Bairn. The issue ends with Niva stating to Bairn that the time has come for them to sail back to Endra and recover her bones. If you call yourself a fan of high fantasy novels, then this one is an absolute must-read and definitely worth your time. And with this, we finally come to an end of our video. Please hit us up with your thoughts in the comment section and let us know what it is that you absolutely love about the GodSlayer. Also, stay tuned on this channel for more interesting content. If you liked our video today, then please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Until next time,